By default, OBS records everything to one file. Your webcam, your iPhone, your screen, whatever you have set up as sources, it all gets mixed together in a single output. That's great for streaming or simple recordings. But if you want to record multiple camera angles and edit them together later, and if you want to cut between a wide shot and a close-up or switch between two people in a conversation, you need separate files, one file per camera. And OBS doesn't do that out of the box. There's a plugin that solves this in about 5 minutes. And once it's set up, OBS will record each camera source to its own separate file automatically every time you hit record. Let's jump right into it. The Source Record plugin was written by a community developer named Elgato. You download it directly from the OBS forums, not from inside OBS itself. Go to obsproject.com/forum/resources/sourcerecord.1285 and click the download button. I'll put a link down below in the description, and I'll also pop a link up on the screen. You want to make sure that OBS is completely closed before you install the plugin. We'll start by installing this on Windows so you can see the installation process. On Windows, there's 2 steps. First, you need to install the Visual C++ redistributable if you don't already have it. You'll see it on the download page under the installation section. It's a Microsoft package that the plugin requires to run. If you've installed other software recently, it may already be on your machine. You can try skipping this step first and come back to it if the plugin doesn't show up. Second, you'll want to download the file and choose the Windows installer zip file for Windows. After you've got it downloaded, extract the zip file. Go ahead and run the installer, and it's pretty straightforward. You can just click Next through this. Go ahead and click Finish, and we will start OBS Studio. Once you start OBS Studio, the Source Record filter should appear when you right-click a source and go to Filters. So we'll right-click on our camera, click on Filters, and we'll go down to the bottom, click on the plus, and you'll see Source Record listed. Go ahead and give it a name. And there you go. You can see the Source Record plugin was installed. Now we're going to switch over and install this on a Mac. The process is similar. You want to expand the zip file. Inside you'll find 3 separate installer packages. There's going to be an ARM64 package. That's for all the M series Macs. There's a universal package, and then there's an Intel-based package. If you're running on an M series Mac, go ahead and run the ARM64 package. You may run into the security permissions prompt from a Mac, so you'll need to go down and allow this file to be opened. You do that by opening System Preferences, going to Privacy and Security. You'll have to click Done, and then you'll see the package appear. You can tell it to open anyway. And then once again, click Open Anyway. And we've got to enter our password. And then we should finally be able to install it on our Mac. So go ahead and follow the wizard. All right, we have got it installed, and now we will open OBS. Now on our Mac, we simply right-click on one of the cameras. We choose Filters. Hit the plus down in Effects Filters, and you'll see Source Record listed. Go ahead and give it a name. And there you see the menu pop up for Source Record. Now let's add the Source Record filter to each camera source. In the Sources panel, right-click on your first camera source, click Filters, and the window opens. Click the plus button in the bottom half of the window, select Source Record from the list, and give it a name. The filter is now added, so let's walk through every setting from top to bottom so you understand exactly what you're configuring. The first drop-down is Record Mode. You'll want to set this to recording. That means the source only captures its own file when you hit the record button in OBS. Hit record once, and every source you've configured this way starts its own file simultaneously. The other options, Always, Streaming, Virtual Camera, are for different workflows. Recording is what you want for initial multi-camera recording work. If you select Always, be careful. That'll chew up hard drive space, because that means as soon as you open OBS, all of the Source Record filters start recording simultaneously, whether you're recording in OBS, whether you're streaming, or if it's just sitting there. So you'll run out of hard drive space really quickly. Streaming is just what you would expect. When you start your stream, Source Record will start recording those files immediately. Streaming or recording, that's if you switch between streaming or recording and you don't want to have to remember which one you do. Whenever you start your stream or start recording, Source Record will start automatically. Virtual Camera is a corner use case that almost nobody will ever use. For path, click Browse and choose where you want this source's file to be saved. Create a dedicated folder for your multi-camera recordings, something like a multicam folder in your movie folder. Keeping all source files in one place makes importing into Premiere so much easier. File name formatting. This controls how each file gets named. The default uses date and timestamps, which is useful. I'd recommend adding a label for each source at the end so you can tell the files apart after recording. For example, add a dash and the camera name, -iPhone, -Canon, so the files are immediately identifiable when you open the folder. I'll go ahead and add a -iPhone. Recording format. Set this to MKV. MKV is more resilient to crashes than MP4. If OBS crashes mid-recording, an MKV file is usually still recoverable. A crashed MP4 is often unreadable entirely. After recording, you can convert MKV to MP4 inside OBS with no quality loss. Go to Tools, Remux, Recordings. It'll take about 10 seconds. Automatic file splitting. Leave this unchecked for most recording sessions. File splitting is useful if you're doing very long recordings and want the output broken into smaller chunks. For example, splitting every 15 minutes so no single file gets too large. For a typical tutorial or video session, just leave it off. Maximum seconds, leave this at 0. 0 means no limit on recording length. If you set a number here, the recording stops automatically after that many seconds. It's not real useful for what we're doing. The replay buffer. Leave this unchecked. Replay buffer is a gaming feature that saves the last few seconds of footage on demand without recording everything continuously. This is not relevant to multi-camera recording work. Stream mode is set to none, and you can leave it exactly there. This section is for people using Source Record to send a specific source to a streaming service separately from the main OBS output. We're not working on that in this video. Background color. You want to leave this at the default black. Background color only matters if your source has transparent areas, like a graphic or browser source with no background. For a camera source, the camera generally fills the entire frame, so you'll never see the background. Different audio. This is the most critical step. Do not skip this. You want to make sure that you check the different audio box. This is what puts audio into your source recording files. Without it, the file records video only with no audio, and that's not what you want. Once you check it, 2 additional fields open up. Audio track. You want to set this to track 1. That's the main mixed audio from your OBS session. Source. This is where you select which audio source feeds the track. Set this to whatever your main microphone input is. In my case, that's the Vocaster 2. The Vocaster 2 is the interface between my microphone and the computer. That's where all the audio passes through. You'll see whatever sources you have active in OBS listed here. Select your primary microphone or your primary audio interface. The reason this matters for our workflow is every source file needs the same audio so that Premiere can sync them automatically using matching waveforms. Track 1 from your microphone is identical in every file, and that's the anchor Premiere Pro uses to line everything up. The same would apply for DaVinci Resolve or other editors. You want to leave scale unchecked for now. Scale lets you record the source at a lower resolution than it's actually capturing. This is useful if you want to save storage space. If you find your files are eating up too much storage, you can come back and enable this and set a lower resolution. For a first setup, leave it off and record at full resolution. Frame rate. Your frame rate will show whatever matches your OBS output settings. Mine shows 29.97 frames per second. Leave it at whatever it defaults to for your project. Don't change it here. Set the video encoder to Apple VT-H264 hardware encoder if you're using a Mac. This uses the dedicated encoding chip built into your Mac instead of the CPU. When you're running multiple simultaneous recordings, this matters significantly. You want the hardware handling the encoding work, not the CPU trying to do everything at once. On Windows, you'll see different options. Choose NVENC if you have an NVIDIA GPU, or AMF for AMD. Both are hardware encoders. Avoid software X264 for this workflow. For your audio encoder, leave that at FFmpeg AAC. That handles the audio compression in each source file. The default settings are totally fine. If you're using the Apple VT-H264 hardware encoder, you'll see a menu below that says Rate Control, Bit Rate, Keyframe Interval, Profile. So Rate Control is set to CBR with a bit rate of 6,000 kilobits per second. Leave those settings. CBR at 6000 kpps is solid for 1080p source files you'll edit in Premiere. It maintains consistent quality across the recording. Leave the keyframe interval at 2 seconds. This controls how frequently the encoder writes a full frame versus a difference frame. 2 seconds is a good balance for editing source files. It means Premiere can scrub through the footage cleanly without having to decode too many frames back to a starting point. Set profile to high if it isn't already. High gives you the best compression efficiency. Baseline and main are for compatibility constrained situations that you're not likely to encounter in this workflow. Make sure Use B-frames is unchecked. B-frames improve compression, but they add encoding complexity and can cause scrubbing and playback issues in Premiere when you're working with source files. Just leave it off. Leave Spatial AQ at disabled. It's a quality enhancement that adds encoding overhead to every frame. When you're running multiple simultaneous recordings, you want to reduce the workload on the encoder, not add to it. The FFmpeg AAC section at the bottom controls the audio quality in your source file. The default of 128 kbps is fine for voice recording. Leave it at 128. That's every setting. Close the filters window. Now, repeat this process for each additional camera source you want to record separately. Remember, right-click the source, click Filters, click Add Source Record, give it a name, click OK, and go through the same settings. Record mode to recording, format MKV, file name with a label for that camera, different audio checked with track 1 and your microphone source selected. Each source gets its own filter and its own output path. Once they're all configured, you're ready to do a test recording. Here's a little bonus section as we start to configure everything. I needed to add a second camera for this video, so I'm actually going to use my iPhone for this. So if you already know how to do this, feel free to jump ahead to later in the video. This is going to show you how to set up an iPhone or an iPad as a source inside of OBS on a Mac. So if you're on a Mac running Ventura or later, and your iPhone is on iOS 16 or later, Apple built in something called Continuity Camera that'll turn your iPhone into a wireless webcam. There's no apps to install, no third-party software. It just works. To use it in OBS, make sure your iPhone and Mac are on the same Wi-Fi network and signed into the same Apple ID. Then, in OBS, we're going to select a new source. We're going to select Video Capture Device. We'll call it iPhone. Go ahead and click OK. We'll click the drop-down for Device, and we'll choose Matt's iPhone camera. The preset's high. You see the video signal from my iPhone. And then in the lower right corner, you actually see the video signal from my Canon R6 Mark II camera. This same process would work for an iPad as well. So now we're going to do a quick test to make sure Source Record is recording all the sources independently. We should see a file output with iPhone at the end of it. We should see an output with Canon at the end of it. And we should have the main output, which is just the desktop with both of those camera feeds muxed together as well. So let's take a look. Looking at the screen now, we do see the proper files. We see one that has Canon appended to the end of it. We have one that has iPhone appended to the end of it. And then we've got our main OBS recording file right here. So you can see Screen Recorder did do the job here. We got 3 separate video files with their corresponding audio file. Let's jump into Premiere now and see how this would work. I'm going to manually show you how to synchronize all of these files inside of Adobe Premiere just so you can see we have the different camera angles. I've already created a sequence and imported the raw files. I'm going to drag the base one over and just get a baseline. There's an extra audio track I don't need. I'm going to delete that. So here's the raw video showing all of the camera angles muxed together. Now I'm going to bring in the small Canon camera angle onto the timeline, and I'm just going to drop the audio down below. I'm going to select both of these, drag them over here to make them a little bit easier to manage. I'm going to select all of them. I'm going to right click. I'm going to synchronize, and I'm going to make sure it's set to audio track channel 1. Click OK. And there it's synced those up. And now I'm going to bring the iPhone footage over. Same process. I'm going to drag these to separate lines, select them both, drag them over here to make it easier to select everything. And once again, select all of these, right click, I'm going to synchronize again to audio track channel 1. There we go. Now we've got them all synchronized together. I'm going to hit the delete button to move them over to the beginning of the timeline. And now one thing I'm going to do, since they're all stacked on top of each other, I'm going to turn off this bottom layer, move the playhead over a little bit. So there we see the iPhone one. I'm going to move the iPhone camera over to the left. Down below you can see the Canon small camera. I'm going to move that over to the right. And then down underneath, I'm going to turn this layer back on just so you can see we've got all 3 of them. And if I hit play, You should see everything is fully in sync at this point. Source Record did do what I needed it to do. It split all of those out. So I've got all of my takes as individual camera angles so I can do editing however I want them inside of Adobe Premiere. Similar concept exists for most editors as well. So let's jump back into our discussion. There's one more thing to check before you commit to a longer recording session. When you're using a USB camera source, whether it's an iPhone, iPad, or a webcam, there's often a slight delay between the video signal and the audio. The camera takes time to encode and transmit the video over USB, which means your audio can arrive slightly ahead of the picture. You won't notice it while recording, but it will definitely show up in playback. The fix is inside OBS. Go up to Edit, go to Advanced Audio Properties. You'll see a sync offset column for each audio source. This lets you delay the audio by a specific number of milliseconds to match the video. The tricky part is finding the right value because it varies by camera and USB connection. The practical way to dial it in is to record a short test clip and clap once clearly on camera. Then play it back and watch the frame where your hands meet. If the clap sound comes before that frame, add a sync offset to the audio in small increments, usually somewhere between 100 and 300 milliseconds until the sound and the picture line up. It takes a few test clips to nail it, but once you have the right offset for your camera, you can save it and it stays set for every future recording. And you can see here I have a set of 200 milliseconds. I want to cover a few things that I ran into while setting this up because you're probably going to hit them too. The first was the encoded overloaded warning. This first one is a message at the bottom of OBS. Encoding overloaded, consider turning down video settings or using a faster encoding preset. If you see this after adding Source Record, it means OBS is being asked to encode more simultaneous streams than your hardware can keep up with. Running multiple source recordings on top of your main output is generally demanding work. The first thing to check is your encoder. In OBS settings, output, make sure your encoder is set to a hardware option. On a Mac, that's Apple VT-H264 hardware encoder. Also make sure Apple VT is turned on inside each source record filter individually. It needs to be on every one, not just the first. For the encoder settings, set profile to high, turn B-frames off, and leave spatial AQ off. B-frames add encoding complexity and can cause playback issues when you bring back the files into Premiere. You don't want them in editing source files. And that applies to DaVinci Resolve and other editors as well. If you're using a capture card to bring a dedicated camera into OBS, something like an Elgato Camlink 4K, check what resolution your camera is sending over HDMI. My Canon R6 Mark II was sending a 4K signal through the Camlink, and OBS was trying to process that across multiple simultaneous recordings. That was too much even for the hardware encoder. I could see the lag in the OBS preview before I even started recording. Now the iPhone source was perfectly smooth, but the Canon looked delayed and choppy. That fix was relatively simple. I set the Camlink input resolution in OBS to 1920 by 1080. The encoding overloaded warning cleared immediately and both sources are recorded cleanly. If you're hitting that warning, check your capture card resolution before you change anything else. You're recording editing source files. You don't necessarily need 4K coming into OBS. 1080p is the right setting for this workflow. Before we wrap, there's a question worth answering. Should you even be using OBS for this at all? A viewer named Roland left a comment on my OBS tutorial asking whether the OBS encoding step introduces visible quality degradation compared to just recording natively on each device, his iPhone, iPad, and webcam separately, for example, and then syncing the files in post. His instinct was right to ask. There is technically a quality difference. So let me give you an honest answer. The native approach, recording directly on your iPhone, iPad, and webcam separately, does give you the highest possible quality from each device. There's no re-encoding. The file that you get is exactly what the sensor captured with zero generation loss. The trade-off is in workflow. You're managing storage on 3 separate devices, transferring files from each one, then syncing them manually in your editor. The OBS approach with Source Record adds one encoding step. OBS takes the incoming signal from each device and re-encodes it to your chosen format. That does introduce some generation loss, but here's the practical reality. At the bit rates OBS uses at high quality settings, that loss is practically invisible on a website, on YouTube, or in any compressed delivery format. You'd really need to be doing broadcast or archival work where the master files are never compressed for the native approach to have a meaningful quality advantage. For most creators, Website video, YouTube, social media, the OBS approach wins on every practical measure. One console, one button, files that are already in sync, and no transfer workflow to manage. The quality is more than good enough, and the workflow is dramatically simpler, if your computer can handle it. If you're doing archival or broadcast work where you need the absolute highest quality master files and don't mind managing separate device transfers, then I would record natively. For most people watching this, OBS is probably the right answer. This video came directly from a viewer comment. If you have a specific OBS workflow question, drop it in the comments. That's generally how upcoming videos get made. I'll see you in the next video.